For decades, they watched us from the shadows, lights in the sky, vanished time, voices without a source. But what if I told you? These aren't stories, they're real. 31 chilling encounters from around the world. Witness accounts that were never meant to be heard. Until now, this isn't science fiction, it's science fact. And it could happen to you next. Here are the mysterious stories about aliens. The Pascagoula Abduction. In a quiet October evening in 1973, the still waters of the Pascagoula River in Mississippi became the backdrop for one of the most unsettling encounters in UFO history. Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, two shipyard workers, had planned a peaceful night of fishing. Instead, they would emerge with the story that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. According to their account, a strange craft descended near the riverbank, emitting a bluish light. Moments later, three robotic-like beings, pale, featureless, and floating, approached and immobilized the men. They claimed they were taken aboard the craft, subjected to examinations, and returned to the shore in a state of stunned disbelief. What makes the Pascagoula incident unique isn't just the tale itself, it's what followed. When the men reported the event to local authorities, they were secretly recorded during a private moment. Rather than scheming or celebrating a hoax, the tape captured their raw fear and confusion. No physical evidence was ever The Travis Walton abduction in the crisp evening of November 5, 1975, deep in the forests of Arizona's Apache Sitgreaves Mountains, a logging crew's routine day took a turn into legend. As 6 men drove home after work near the town of Snowflake, they noticed an unusual glow filtering through the trees. Curious, they stopped, and there, suspended silently above a clearing, was a luminous, disc-shaped craft. Without hesitation, 22-year-old Travis Walton approached it. A sudden beam of light struck him, lifting him off the ground and hurling him backward. Terrified, the crew fled. When they returned minutes later, Travis was gone. What followed sparked a media firestorm. Law enforcement launched a massive search. Friends and family feared the worst, that he had been killed. But 5 days later, Walton reappeared, disoriented and shaken, claiming he had been aboard a craft not of this world. Under hypnosis and lie detector tests, Walton recounted being examined by humanoid beings in a sterile, The Lubbock lights. It began on a warm August evening in 1951, an ordinary night over Lubbock, Texas, until the skies lit up with a series of glowing objects that would captivate the nation. Witnesses described them as luminous bluish-green lights, silently gliding in tight formation across the sky. Among the first to report the sightings were 3 science professors from Texas Technological College. They observed the lights multiple times, estimating them to be traveling at speeds far beyond any known aircraft. Their credibility brought instant attention to the case, drawing interest from both the public and the military. In the weeks that followed, dozens of residents across Lubbock claimed to witness the same phenomenon, an arc of lights moving in synchronized patterns, sometimes appearing in a V formation. One teenager even managed to capture the lights in a series of black and white photographs that would become iconic in the annals of UFO history. The Air Force launched an investigation under Project Blue Book. While officials suggested the lights might be birds reflecting streetlights, specifically plover birds, the explanation failed to convince many, especially those who had seen the objects up close. Decades later, the Lubbock lights remain a subject of speculation. Were they a natural atmospheric event, a classified military project, or something entirely unknown? The skies over Texas have long since quieted, but the question lingers: what exactly flew over Lubbock that summer night? The Exeter Incident. In the early hours of September 3, 1965, the quiet town of Exeter, New Hampshire, became the center of one of America's most compelling UFO cases. It started just before 2 a.m. when Norman Muscarello, a teenager walking along Route 150, saw brilliant red lights hovering silently above a farmhouse. The lights moved without sound, illuminating the countryside in pulses. Frightened, Muscarello ran to the nearby Exeter police station, where Officer Eugene Bertrand had already received similar reports from local motorists. Together, they returned to the site. There, joined by Officer David Hunt, all 3 witnessed the lights again, large, bright, and moving in a bizarre, seemingly intelligent manner. The object hovered low, emitting no noise, yet its lights blinked in an erratic sequence. Horses nearby were reportedly agitated, and the men later described a sense of unease, as if something beyond their understanding loomed just above. The Air Force investigated the sighting as part of Project Blue Book. Their conclusion: the witnesses may have seen stars or lights from nearby military aircraft, but skeptics argue this explanation failed to account for the low altitude, the intensity of the lights, or the corroborated witness testimony from trained officers. Today, the Exeter incident stands as a well-documented case, with credible observers, official reports, and no clear resolution. In the small New England town, the night sky may appear calm, but memories of what once hovered there have never fully faded. The Socorro UFO Incident. In April 24, 1964, in the arid silence of Socorro, New Mexico, a police officer's routine patrol turned into one of the most perplexing UFO encounters in American history. Lonnie Zamora, a well-respected patrolman, was chasing a speeding car on the outskirts of town when a thunderous roar and a flash of blue flame drew his attention to a nearby gully. Curious and concerned, Zamora turned off the road and approached the site. What he saw would ignite decades of debate. Perched on the desert floor was a shiny, oval-shaped object, no windows, no markings, resting on 4 metallic legs. Nearby, 2 small humanoid figures, dressed in white, appeared to be inspecting it. As Zamora approached, the figures vanished, and the object emitted a powerful roar and flame, before lifting off and accelerating silently into the sky. Zamora's radio call brought backup, and within hours, FBI and Air Force investigators were on site. Burn marks and imprints in the ground confirmed something had been there. Yet, despite thorough analysis, no conclusive explanation was ever found. Project Blue Book listed the Socorro case as unidentified. Unlike many UFO reports, this one was never dismissed as a hoax. Zamora's credibility, the physical evidence, and the lack of motive made the event especially difficult to explain. Even now, the desert outside Socorro remains unchanged, quiet, vast, and indifferent. But for those who look to the skies, it holds the memory of something that came and went, without a trace. The McMinnville UFO photos in 1950, on a quiet farm near McMinnville, Oregon, two photographs would spark one of the most enduring debates in UFO history. Paul Trent, a farmer, was preparing to return inside after feeding his animals when his wife, Evelyn, called out something was in the sky. Hovering silently in the early evening light was a metallic, disc-shaped object. Paul retrieved his camera and snapped two quick photos before the object vanished into the horizon. The images, later published in Life magazine, showed a classic flying saucer, tilted, reflective, and suspended against a cloudy sky. Unlike many UFO stories, these photos were not circulated for fame or financial gain. In fact, the Trents were reluctant to share them, and only did so after a friend urged them to report the sighting. What followed was decades of scrutiny. Experts in optics, photography, and aviation all weighed in. Analyses varied, some claiming the object was a simple model suspended by string, others insisting that no evidence of trickery could be found. In 1975, and again in the 2000s, advanced image analysis failed to conclusively debunk the photos. To this day, the McMinnville images remain among the clearest and most hotly debated UFO photographs ever taken. Were they evidence of something beyond our understanding, or simply a clever fabrication that stood the test of time? The truth may rest not in the pixels of the photos, but in the sky above rural Oregon, still quiet, still watching. The Childs Whitted sighting at 2:45 a.m. on July 24, 1948. High above the sleeping towns of Alabama, two experienced airline pilots encountered something that defied explanation. Captain Clarence Childs and co-pilot John Whitted were flying in Eastern Airlines DC-3 from Houston to Atlanta. The night sky was clear as they cruised at 5,000 feet near Montgomery. Suddenly, glowing object, brilliant and cigar-shaped, burst into view. It approached at high speed, leveling off to fly parallel with their aircraft. The pilots described it as over 100 feet long, with no wings, and lined with rows of windows emitting a bluish light. A fiery exhaust trailed behind it. Within seconds, the object veered upward and disappeared into the clouds with a burst of speed. The incident was officially reported and investigated by the U.S. Air Force under Project Sign. At the time, it was one of the earliest and most credible sightings of a so-called flying saucer by trained aviation professionals. Skeptics later suggested a meteor as a possible explanation, but the structured shape, level flight path, and glowing windows made that unlikely. Even decades later, the Childs Whitted sighting remains a cornerstone in early UFO lore, compelling not only for the credibility of the witnesses, but for the timing. It occurred just as the US was entering the atomic age, and public awareness of aerial phenomena was intensifying. The skies that night were quiet once again, but something unknown had passed through. The Japan Airlines Flight 1628 incident. In the frozen skies above Alaska, a routine cargo flight turned into one of the most perplexing encounters in aviation history. On November 17, 1986, Japan Airlines Flight 1628 was en route from Paris to Tokyo, carrying a load of wine. As the Boeing 747 cruised at 35,000 feet over eastern Alaska, Captain Kenju Tarachi, a seasoned pilot and former fighter jet aviator, noticed unusual lights to the left of the cockpit. What he and his crew witnessed over the next 50 minutes would challenge conventional understanding of what belongs in our skies. Two unidentified craft, described as rectangular and emitting glowing lights, maneuvered with extraordinary agility near the jumbo jet. Then, a massive, walnut-shaped object much larger than the aircraft itself appeared, trailing them at a close distance. The crew could see its physical structure, not just lights. Ground radar briefly confirmed an object, and Tarachi requested a change in altitude to avoid it. The object followed. Despite multiple radar blips and corroboration from the crew, the FAA and U.S. Air Force could not offer a definitive explanation. Captain Tarachi was temporarily grounded for speaking out, but the case remains open in the records of UFO investigations. Was it an advanced craft unknown to current aerospace technology, or a rare meteorological illusion amplified by fatigue and darkness? Decades later, the skies over Alaska remain quiet, but the radar tapes and pilot testimony still whisper of something unexplained. The O'Hare International Airport UFO sighting in a cold November afternoon in 2006. One of America's busiest airports briefly became the stage for an aerial mystery that remains unsolved to this day. At approximately 4:15 p.m. on November 7th, United Airlines employees at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport reported seeing a strange, disc-shaped object hovering silently over Gate C-17. The metallic craft, described as dark gray and about 6 to 24 feet in diameter, was visible for several minutes just beneath the cloud layer before it suddenly shot upward, piercing the overcast sky and leaving a crisp, circular hole in the clouds. Multiple witnesses, including pilots, ramp workers, and airline supervisors, independently confirmed the sighting. Despite the numerous credible observers, the FAA initially dismissed the event, attributing it to a weather phenomenon, and declined to investigate. No radar data showed an anomaly, yet those who saw the object were adamant this was no ordinary aircraft. The story only came to public attention after a Chicago Tribune investigation, prompting widespread media coverage and a renewed debate over aviation safety and governmental transparency. Why was such a significant event seemingly swept under the radar, literally and figuratively? No physical evidence was recovered, and the object was never identified. Still, the hole left in the cloud cover, an unofficial explanation, remains. In the realm of controlled airspace, where every object is tracked and logged, the O'Hare sighting quietly asks a disturbing question. What, if anything, is flying above us that we can't see or won't acknowledge? The Kecksburg incident in the evening of December 9, 1965, a fiery object streaked across the skies of 6 U.S. states and parts of Canada before crashing into a wooded area near Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. What followed was a swift and unsettling response that turned a small town into the center of one of America's most enduring UFO mysteries. Witnesses described a metallic, acorn-shaped object roughly the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, partially buried in the ground and etched with strange markings unlike any known language. Within hours, U.S. military personnel arrived, cordoned off the area, and reportedly removed the object under tight security. Locals were told it was a meteor, but no fragments were ever publicly shown, and official records left more questions than answers. NASA claimed decades later that it was debris from a failed Soviet satellite, Cosmos 96. Yet independent analysis of the satellite's trajectory suggests it couldn't have landed in Pennsylvania. Eyewitnesses, some of whom were threatened into silence, continue to insist what they saw was not of human origin, or at least, not publicly acknowledged technology. Despite multiple Freedom of Information Act requests and a court-ordered document release in 2007, the full truth remains elusive. What exactly fell in those woods? A space probe? A Cold War artifact? Or something entirely different, something meant to disappear? The Kecksburg object may be long gone, but the silence left behind speaks volumes. And somewhere, perhaps, the answers remain locked away just out of reach. The Tinley Park lights in a quiet night in September 2004, the skies above Tinley Park, a suburb of Chicago, became the stage for a display that would confound thousands. It began with 3 red lights, glowing in a perfect triangle, hovering silently in the air. No sound, no movement, just stillness and a growing sense of unease. Witnesses from all across the region, from families on porches to police officers on patrol, reported the same phenomenon. The lights were too far apart to be from a single craft, yet too perfectly aligned to be random. They hovered for minutes, then vanished only to reappear again in the same triangular formation, night after night, over the following weeks. Local news outlets were flooded with calls. Amateur video recordings surfaced, each showing nearly identical patterns. Some suggested military flares, others proposed experimental aircraft, but neither explanation accounted for the duration, precision, or the repeated sightings. The Federal Aviation Administration remained silent. No official investigation was launched. Or something else entirely, watching silently from above, then fading into the dark. In a remote part of northwestern Canada, over 30 witnesses scattered across different towns and communities reported seeing the same extraordinary object. A massive, silent, cigar-shaped craft gliding across the night sky. It was no ordinary sighting. Many described the object as being up to a mile long, covered in glowing lights, and moving with a slow, deliberate pace. There was no sound, no jet propulsion. Just an enormous shape, blotting out the stars as it moved. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police took statements. Pilots, hunters, and local residents, many with no prior interest in UFOs, gave remarkably consistent testimonies. The craft had hovered low, close enough that some reported seeing surface details. Yet, radar stations detected nothing out of the ordinary. No military tests were announced. No aircraft were reported missing or rerouted. The case remains one of the most credible mass sightings in Canadian history, due to the sheer number of witnesses, the clarity of their descriptions, and the calm demeanor with which they reported the event. Was it a secret military craft? A rare atmospheric illusion? Or something far beyond our current understanding? As the northern winds swept away the last traces of that silent colossus, it left behind only questions and the quiet unease of an answer that never came.